have Ford, GM, Stellantis all shot themselves in the foot, thereby causing the union, the UAW, to make such wild demands? And do they only have themselves to blame? Well, regular viewers will know I like to simplify things, so before looking at Ford or GM accounts and why they might have shot themselves in the foot, let's have a look at personal budgeting. Let's say, for example, you pay all your bills, you buy your food, and at the end of the month you discover you've got £100 left over. It's not needed, it's just there. So what do you do with it? Well, you could, for example, have a night out, go and watch a show, have a meal, maybe buy new trainers. That's all fine. But if you find the reason you have £100 spare is because you've loaded up your credit card more than normal, then the sensible course of action would be to use that £100 to reduce your outstanding balance, and that gives you two benefits. First, it reduces the balance. Second, it makes next month's payment a bit less. Well, whichever you choose to do is entirely up to you. Both are valid. If your overall spending is well within budget, but you just happen to have used your credit card for a specific, say, emergency, and you'll be able to pay it off in full next month, then you could easily choose to go out for a meal. That's quite sensible. If, however, your credit card debt is growing, alarmingly, even more than the £100 a month, then it would actually be rash to go and have a meal out. Either way, it's entirely your choice, and nobody else needs to know. And when you run a company, particularly a limited or a PLC, then the situation's very different. If you find yourself with, say, 1 billion profit at the end of the year, as a limited company or PLC, you are legally required to publish audited accounts every year, often called profit and loss or financial statement. We'll take Ford Blue, the car-making bit of Ford, which last year did report an EBITDA, earnings before interest and taxation, profit of 2.1 billion. This is the difference between what they sell and what the manufacturing cost to make those cars is. And likewise, Ford Pro, the commercial vehicle section, also made a profit, just over another 2 billion, leaving the Ford EV business dragging it all down, with 1.7 billion loss in 2022, but projected to go up over 5 billion in 2023. And Ford does have debt due for repayment in the next 12 months of about 100 billion. Yeah, far more, but this is in the next 12 months. That will need to be paid back or refinanced, and at a much higher rate. So what should they do with the profits? Well, they have the same choices as you, but on a much larger scale. Now, if the company's doing really well, paying all its bills on time, and seeing the future as rosy with growing sales, growing profits, then the money really could be regarded as a profit. They could do with it what they wanted. However, if the company's not doing that well, sales are falling, costs are rising, debts are increasing at a scary rate as the interest rates rise even higher, then that money's not really a profit. And if your debts are rising at a faster rate than the profits, then doing anything other than paying off some of those debts could be seen as reckless. Well, guess what Ford chose? Well, no prizes for guessing. Well, their situation is much more complicated than you at home. Well, first, Ford does not own Ford. A long time ago, the owners or the directors took the company public, selling shares in itself to raise money, probably for growth or expansion. At that point, members of the public, plus banks and pension funds, bought those shares and in effect owned the company. So a PLC is owned by its shareholders, each of which has a number of shares which it has purchased. And they did so for one single reason: to make money. They hoped that if the company grew and it was well managed, then its value would also grow, making their shares worth more. When and if they sold their shares, they would make a profit. They also found out that Ford, to encourage people to buy their shares, offered a profit or dividend each year from any profits it made. So, in effect, you get an income while you own the shares and you make a profit when you sell them. That's a win-win. While Ford gets no money at all when existing shares are bought and sold, they do get money if they print some new shares and sell them. Also, the health of the company is judged on the share value, Rising share price means more people are trying to buy them than sell them, a sign the company is good and profitable, has good prospects for being so in the future. Also, there might be a healthy dividend on offer out of those profits. Well, that's a good investment. However, a falling share price generally means the market feels the company could be in trouble or likely to report a future loss or drop in profits. Chance of shares losing value and no dividend on offer. Not a good investment. And that is important because if a company needs to borrow to expand or launch new products, the banks look at the share price and offer different rates accordingly. A healthy company will get lower rates than a struggling company as the risk is different. Well, Jim Farley is the CEO of Ford. That means the other directors or the shareholders have voted him into that position, believing he'll do a good job and make them a nice healthy profit. And he'll remain there as long as the term offered on his initial appointment, and providing that his directors and shareholders have faith in him. If Ford makes mistakes or loses loads of money, or the future prospects look decidedly bleak, they can get rid of him on the spot. Last year, Herman Diess, the ex-CEO of VW Group, was sacked on the spot when he criticised the board's decisions regarding the future of EVs. So all directors and CEOs are there only as long as they are seen to be doing a good job and achieving what the shareholders want: dividends and a rising share price. Well, this year Ford paid a dividend of around 15 cents a share for the common shares, totaling over $2 billion. But they also sell different shares. Some are worth more than others, again to encourage people to buy them short-term, long-term. And this year some shareholders received 65 cents per share. That cost billions more. Well, Jim Farley chose to declare a net $2 billion loss, in line with him issuing a profit warning at the end of Q4 2022, stating that the future profits were not looking healthy. In return, Ford paid him a huge bonus and a salary increase, along with his co-directors, and the shareholders were paid a really generous dividend, making them happy. But the company finances are not happy. Not only was their venture into EVs going to cost them $5 billion in losses this financial year and next, but the EV division of the company will also not come into profit for the foreseeable future. It will just continue making a huge loss. On top of that, through absolutely no fault of their own, the world economy has crashed and interest rates rose alarmingly. Debts, as they became due, were refinanced, but at vastly higher rates of interest. And don't forget, Ford has that $100 billion in debt that needs either paying off or refinancing during 2023. And that is on a reduced profit forecast. Well, the correct thing to do with any profit would have been to use all of the profits to reduce the debt burden. But that would have angered the shareholders who just wanted dividends and rising share prices. Also, it's likely directors and shareholders would have held Jim Farley responsible, well, which he actually was, and got rid of him. So he declared a $2 billion loss and paid out huge dividends, salary rises and bonuses. The shareholders were happy, and Jim got to live another day. But the union wasn't happy. You see, the United Auto Workers Union was watching and saw huge bonuses being paid out to the wealthy, huge dividends being paid to the wealthy, and wanted some of that for their members. Because the new union leader, Shawn Fain, was himself treading on very thin ice. The union was seeing a huge drop in membership numbers. From its heyday in the 70s and 80s, membership dropped from around, 1.5 million to less than 300,000 today, and it's still dropping. More importantly, was reputation. The previous directors of the union were heading to prison at a scary old rate. The former president, Gary Jonas, was just sentenced to 28 months in prison. The vice president got 66 months, and their financial analyst got 15 months in prison. It goes back a long way before that. The former president, before the one who just went to prison, also is in prison on a 21-month sentence, and the former regional director is in prison sentenced to 12 months for embezzling union funds. Well, it was not a happy union that Sean took over. Now, this in no way suggests that Sean also is involved in anything shady. Perish the thought. But he found himself in a mess of bad reputation, falling membership, total loss of faith or respect. So he set about changing things. He took one look at Ford's profit and loss for 2022 and saw the rich and wealthy creaming off profits while his members had not had a decent pay rise for years. And they genuinely deserved one. But that's not how the capitalist system works. Now, I've no way of knowing if he's looked at the overall financial picture, realises the company is already almost insolvent, and the elite are creaming off the profits while they can, or whether he sees the company as viable but needs a different wealth distribution. I'm not sure if he cares. He's out to make a name for himself. So, back to the plot. Ford is seeing a rise in debt and debt payments while sales are declining. Now, I know that the figures seem to show that sales are increasing, but first, over the long term, compared to the peaks in about 2008, 2016, they're still way down. And second, after 3 years of virus and lockdowns, the dealers were almost empty of new vehicles to sell to customers, and they had no money anyhow. Now, Ford doesn't sell direct, it sells the cars they make to their dealers, and the dealers pay Ford a monthly payment if that vehicle is still in stock after a preset period of time. That's financed by Ford Credit, a part of the Ford Group. So in practice, Ford finances each car it sells to its own dealers and only gets paid finally if that vehicle is sold to a real customer, or is still there unsold after a few months when the dealer will begin making payments, a bit like a lease. So while the turnover shows a vehicle's sale on the balance sheets and credits the books with its values, Ford is in reality buying that car and increasing their debt. Each car sold therefore appears as a profit, but actually increases Ford debt by the same value. Well, this is corporate finance. And in the real world, there is a very strict limit to how long this can go on for. If dealers manage to sell all the stock, Ford gets paid in full, the debt gets cleared, so this is the preferred option. If dealers do not sell their stock, Ford must continuously increase its debt to cover the costs of running Ford, until the banks say enough is enough. Well, that day is almost here. You see, debt helps a company run and expand until the day the company can no longer pay back its debt. It's then faced with trying to generate much needed cash, possibly by a new batch of shares, releasing at rock bottom prices, and that therefore dilutes the value of all the other shares. Not a favourable option. The debt of all the legacy automakers is absolutely enormous and simply cannot go on forever. Ford, GM, Stellantis, yeah, but not just in America. Toyota has the distinction of being the most indebted company on the planet ever. Honda's not far behind, followed by Volkswagen. Oh, it's a long list of others. All companies suffered with lockdowns, and most have not yet returned to their pre-lockdown levels of business, and some might never do. Dealers will always sell cars, that's guaranteed. There are always people who have to buy. Say the builder whose vehicle blows up and he must get another in order to go to work, to those whose vehicles were written off in accidents and the insurance buys them a new one. Some people do really well in a recession and prosper. Some people have new business startups which do well and they need to buy vehicles. So cars and pickups will still sell. It's just the quantity, the volume of sales that is scary low and showing no real signs of recovering. Then along come the EVs that shatter the market that the likes of Ford have traditionally relied on to make their profits. Buyers, enough of them anyway, have decided that EVs are okay and prefer them to ICE cars. Then Tesla, the most successful EV maker, announces the launch of the Cybertruck and takes over 2 million pre-orders and threatens the gravy train the industry has relied on for decades. Pickup trucks. The F-150 ICE version is by far the best-selling American pickup truck in the world and has been for over 4 decades. Yes, suddenly none of the legacy automakers can any longer rely on those sales in the future. Cybertruck may or may not outsell the F-150 or Silverado and the Dodge and the Ram and the Jeep, but it will make a very serious dent in the very near future. Toyota has already lost its world leader status for ICE cars to an EV. Well, if the pickup market loses its guaranteed place to a newcomer, then legacy is on the road to failure. Now, I said that this can only go on for so long. At a certain point, the banks lose faith in the company's ability to repay its debts. At that point, they just stop lending, and then they call in the debts. And while the factories and manufacturing equipment are down on their balance sheets as assets, in reality, they are totally worthless. You see, if Ford goes bust, who in their right mind would want to buy any of their factories at any price, or any of their manufacturing equipment at any price? And Joe Biden's no help. It's well known that he is fully funded by the UAW. He always has been. It's not me saying that, it's him. He once joked on live television that he went to the UAW for funding in his early days in politics, and they told him he was an unknown and to go away and not call them until he had a value to them. Well, obviously, he's now gained that value, and he did indeed call them. Well, nothing wrong with that, not implying anything. All politicians in America are funded to some degree. But Biden taking the side of the union on the picket lines is likely to be a step too far. And it is Ford that will come to him, cap in hand, asking for yet another bailout when the banks run dry. Well, the whole thing is teetering on the brink of a total collapse, and there seems no way out. The legacy automakers around the world built up astronomical debts in the belief that they were invincible, too big to fail. The gravy train would run forever. Well, they believed also that they could just switch to EVs if ever they took off, and found they couldn't. Just have a listen to Jim Farley, his own words.
If I explain to, the listeners how crazy our software system is and why it's so difficult for legacy car companies to get software right, I'll do it very quickly.
Yeah.
So to save probably $500 a vehicle, or let's say 350 quid a vehicle.
Yeah.
We farmed out all the modules that control the vehicles to our suppliers because we could bid them against each other. So Bosch would do the body control module, someone else would do the seat control module, someone else would do the engine control module.
Right.
And we'd have about 150 of these modules with semiconductors all through the car. The problem is the software are all written by, 150 different companies, and they don't talk to each other.
Right.
So even though it says Ford on the front,
Yeah.
I actually have to go to Bosch to get permission to change their seat control software.
Right.
So
Wow.
even if I had a high-speed modem in the vehicle and I had the ability to write their software, it's actually their IP. And I have 150, we call it the loose confederation of software providers, 150 completely different software programming languages. All the structure of the software is different. It's millions of code, and we can't even understand it all. So, that's why at Ford we've decided in the second generation product to completely insource the electrical architecture.
Right.
And to do that, you need to write all the software yourself. But just remember, car companies haven't written software like this.
Yeah.
Ever. They've never written software. So we're literally writing how the vehicle operates, the software to operate the vehicle for the first time ever.
Yeah.
We are now seeing that the track ahead for the gravy train is running out fast, and at the end, they can now see the buffers in plain sight. I fear that Jim Farley is likely to be out of a job very soon, and he'll be replaced by someone who promises the shareholders a return to profit, return to really good dividends, and rising share prices. Well, good luck with that. Sinn Féin union might get a short-term victory for his members, but the long term will be factory closures and his members being laid off permanently. He might gain the distinction of being the only UAW president to shut down the union. Well, once again, the poor pay the bills for the rich. Now, had the rich just given, say, a small token to the poor, a little bit better pay, some better conditions, maybe holiday pay, then the gravy train today would have a longer track in front of it. Had Ford used its paper profits to pay back some of its horrendous debts, it might have had a future. But that train has long since gone. The future is already written. Joe Biden will continue taking donations from the UAW while funding the transition to a renewable future, which in itself is killing off the union jobs, with bills like the Inflation Reduction Act, funding the installation of EV charging stations and giving huge subsidies to EV buyers and manufacturers and component manufacturers like battery factories, which all directly and indirectly condemn the legacy ICE car industry to the history books. Well, when Ford or GM or Stellantis arrive at his door begging for loans or subsidies, he's likely to advise them, sorry, there's no money left, and would advise them to start building and selling EVs of their own. And that's something all of them have tried, and they're all losing huge, obscene sums of money trying. And all of them, without fail, have already reduced, or in some cases totally cut, their EV futures. VW is now shutting down purpose-built EV factories. Stone dead. We have an exciting future ahead of us. Where it ends up, nobody knows. But it will be different in so many ways. Well, apart from the rich, who will still be rich. Well, thanks for watching this far. If you have enjoyed the video or learned from it, please subscribe so you'll be notified when we release the next in the series. And also please consider becoming a Patreon member and supporting us financially. We are a small company, small channel, and every penny helps. I'm Dave.